Hi guys, good morning. Happy Sunday. Welcome to another episode of Clangin and Bangin with Mikey, episode 267. And first things first, happy Black History Month, man. Happy Black History Month. Yes, it's important for black people to recognize our history. It's important for people, for us black folks to understand our history and where we come from and how slavery impacted not just our ancestors' generation, but the generations after that, right? I read a lot, and so a lot of the books I have, they're like I wouldn't say black empowerment, but it would just it's just more along the lines of like like how racism and segregation and all that stuff and how slavery affected not just America but the world, right? One of my favorite books that I read, it was titled Not in My Neighborhood. And the book talks about redlining. And redlining is a particular thing they do pretty much all over the country. But it's mostly, you know, in the southern and eastern states. Redlining is where blacks couldn't even live in certain parts of the areas, where and those parts of the cities and states that they lived in, they had poor, everything was poverty. You had substandard schools, substandard teaching, substandard textbooks, substandard conditions, conditions, living conditions where, um, and ironically, it takes place in my father's home state, Maryland, particularly Baltimore, Maryland. And it talked about how blacks couldn't get loans because they lived in certain parts of the city. Blacks couldn't get adequate housing. They couldn't get adequate heat. And if anybody's lived in Baltimore, the city of Baltimore during the summer times and the winter times, it's bitterly cold and hot. You know, it's bitter. It's bitter. The seasonal changes are just insanely, drastically different. Um. So yeah, and I always thought that book was real interesting and how I can't remember the guy's name, but I remember he was Jewish, and he grew up in Baltimore too, and he was saying the same thing. He's like, well, like it wasn't just African Americans that experienced redlining and everything else too. It was everybody who was non-white, you know. And it's always interesting, man. Learning about the history and learning about different things and hell, if I had the time, um, I would probably book a flight to the Smithsonian and just walk around there all day long. And but in this episode, man, not only is it Black History Month, but I tell people all the time, man, you have to leave people where they at, and you can't voice the conversations. And me personally, professionally, it sucks, it does when people won't get it together or they can't get it together and it's like okay like but how am I going to help you get better if you don't recognize that you have an issue, have a problem, right? And I think a lot of people will just sit there and pretend they have everything together and pretend they're not like like everything's everything and it's not. And and that to me is always crazy because it's like I've never understood that. How people can pretend to be okay, pretend that nothing's bothering them, but at the same time shutting out the entire world. I just don't understand that. It's like there's no fiber in my being that will ever be okay with people doing that, right? And what I realize as I've gotten older is that, hey man, just because, you know, you're in a certain season doesn't mean you have to wait for them to get out of their seasons. And you don't. Um, I typically encounter people um, who I call are in their winter season. What I mean by that, something traumatic happens, a divorce, they find out they've been cheated on, someone in the family dies, that type of shit, right? And not that I help them through it, but it's very rare that I'm going through the same situation that they're going through, and I refuse to trauma bond with people. You know, like we can be cordial, we can be friendly, but we're not trauma bonding over something that's traumatically happened in both of our lives, right? It's like when I lost my brother. Um, my ex-girlfriend, who was my girlfriend at the time, um, we was talking one night, and I said like, no, and she had mentioned something like, oh, like something about trauma bonding and everything like that. So I told her nothing. Like I was like, no, like I'm not gonna trauma bond with you. I've been there before. I've done that, and it's not healthy, cause it's not. and and a lot of people will sit there and be like, oh well, but so and so nice, this and this and that. I'm like, yeah, that's cool, but that's one season, bro. And like, if you get better and you evolve and you transition to another season, and they're still stuck in that season, what does that do for you? You know. That's some good coffee. And I know guys who've been trying to get divorced for years, you know. And I'm like, to me, that's crazy. Um, I just don't understand the the thought process behind that. And, and I don't think I don't think they understand that either. And I've always thought that was strange, man. It's like when you're dealing with certain people and like certain situations keep happening. I'm like, yo, like it's not a coincidence that this shit keeps happening, because it's not, you know. And a lot of people will sit there and they'll make all these rash statements and these rash emotional outputs. And the way I look at it is like, it's like, yo, okay, what's going on? Or it's like when you're dealing with somebody who doesn't know how to communicate, whether professionally or personally. Say that 10 times fast. Um, it's not your job to sit there and figure this shit out. It's not your job to sit there and act like people can get it together when you give them multiple chances to do so, right? And they don't. And I'm gonna say this till I'm blue in the face. Do not test your significant other. You know, I've been tested, you know, and I know when I've been tested, and I'm like, yo, like I'm not gonna engage with you in this because there's no point. I know what you're trying to do, and I really don't appreciate it, so I'm gonna keep it moving. And a lot of people don't know how to handle that, right? And I'm like, yo, it's like you don't get to act a certain way and do certain things, and then still have access to me, right? Um, it's like I used to have this one friend. I haven't talked to her in years because like she's one of them people that she'll play victim in every situation she's in, and I'm like no, there's absolutely no way that you can be a victim in every single situation you're in. And her ex fiance cheated on her, and for about a year or so, you know, she was communicating with him, doing X, Y, and Z, and like she was complaining to me, and I'm like, well, I told her point blank, I was like, I'm gonna be honest with you, nobody talks to nobody else in their text messages every single day, unless the other person they're texting them back. You know? She's like, what? I was like, yeah. He's talking to you every day because you're talking to him. Let's get that straight right now. It's like, stop lying, stop bullshitting me, stop trying to bullshit me because it's not gonna fucking work. And she was like, what? I was like, yeah. It was like, I'm gonna be honest with you. The only reason he's talking to you every single day, the only reason he's calling and texting because you're responding to it. And she was like, what? I was like, yeah. Nobody talks to somebody else via text message if they're not responding. And I was like, and then she asked me for her, my opinion about the situation. Like, well, she said, well, he wants to give it another shot. I'm like, another shot for what? Why would you give another shot to somebody else who, regardless of how your situation was, went off and chose somebody else? I told her I can understand why he did that because I've seen you handle conflict and you're horrible at it. I've seen you, have all these mental breakdowns, and I've seen you try to gaslight yourself into believing that, you're this or you're that, and you're not even close to that. So it's like at the end of the day, it's like I've seen you do certain things. I've seen you handle certain situations horribly. But yet you want to sit there and play that you're the victim? In what universe is that ever okay? In what universe can somebody do what you do and be okay with it? Like, make it make sense, man, because it doesn't make any fucking sense. And it doesn't. And that's the part that I get stuck on because it's like, it shouldn't be this difficult, you know? And, like, that's why I'm at, because it's like, okay, like, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. Great. Okay, cool. But what does that do for the other person? And I remember something she said, like, because they were together for years, like 5, going on 6 years, right? And like she's like, oh, like we never had an argument or a fight. I'm like, that's weird. She's like, what? I was like, that's weird. It's like, you mean to tell me that you lived with somebody, slept with him every night, and you never had an argument with that individual ever? That's not the flex that you think it is. You know? And what I find is like, man, a lot of people, uh, mostly women, they're naturally avoidant. Meaning like they avoid certain things, certain situations. And I'm like, yo, it's like, but if you avoid certain situations and certain conversations, how do you expect to get better? How do you expect to get better if you're just constantly avoiding something that makes you get better? You know? And a lot of people are like, what? I was like, yeah. It's like, why would you consistently avoid something that makes you better? I don't understand that, because I don't. I really don't. Um, it's like, I've seen people complain about their jobs and like never leave their jobs. You know? I've seen people get new opportunities, for higher paying gigs and not take the gig. And I'm like, but you spent all these years complaining about your job. I've seen people go to school, talk about going to school, or talk about finishing the degree or starting the degree, and they haven't done anything. And I'm like, bro, I'm like, sis, what the fuck are you talking about? It's like, you know, I got this one guy that I knew since fucking middle school. And for years after we graduated, he talked about going to school, doing X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, and once I told him, I was like, bro, it's like, you're not gonna go to school, bro. You just love talking about it. You know, you're gonna come up with some sort of excuse as to why you can't go, as to whatever it is, and then you're gonna justify that. And sadly, 20 years later, he's still working in the same spot that he had, the same job that he had since high school. It's sad. It's pathetic, man, because it's like, I just look at that like, and these are people who are more academically smarter than I was. It's like, bro, like, why would you just select a life that it's not fulfilling? You know, why would you select a life that that doesn't make you want to get out of bed in the morning? Like, oh, boom, okay, let's go. You know, why would you sit there and complain about everything else when it's like you had the ample opportunity to change it and you didn't change it? You know, it it's just a lot of things that people don't think about, man. I'm like, you should think about it, bro. It's like it should be a situation that's on your head, where, oh, if I don't get X, Y, and Z together, I could end up like, the 50-year-old dude, making $12 an hour, you know, because he ain't got no real skills, and it's like, the way I look at it, it's simply that, man. It's heartbreaking to a point because it's like you have all these people out there that who can make an actual impact, or who know they can do X, Y, and Z, and it's like they don't get that done, and I'm like, how do you not get that done, you know? And I just look at that, and the difference of it is me being older, me being wiser, and me understanding that we all live in borrowed time, you know, and we have to make the most of things that we know while we still have access to them. And I don't mean people, man. I just mean situations. I think it's really disheartening when people end up in situations where like they know better and they still don't do better. You know, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I said like, and this individual talked about like, you know, women or men having kids by 7 or 8 different people, and I'm like, yeah, but that's equally just as bad as the woman who stayed and had, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kids, and I know people who've done that, um, and have kids with the same bum over and over and over again, and then they want to be like, oh yeah, X, Y, and Z, yada yada yada, but I'm like, no, you can't, you know, like you can't sit there and like say that he's such a bad person, or he's this or he's that. And I'm like, you chose to stay. Yes, the situations are different. Yes, I don't know the dynamics of it fully, but after a point in time, if you're constantly being, the second option, or if you're constantly, being cheated on or whatever it is, or being accused of cheating, then what's that tell you? Most likely the other person accusing you of doing what they're accusing you of doing, they're doing that shit by themselves already. And it's like, what's sad and disheartening is that it's the kids who go through that situations, because it's like they end up growing up in chaos and conflict and just disruption. Like they end up growing up in situations where it's like, fuck, all mom and dad do a fight. You know, I didn't I didn't recognize what a healthy relationship was until I moved out on my own to a different state where, you know, and I'm like, oh, this like, okay, this is interesting, you know. Oh, you mean I can have conversations without you blowing up? Damn, okay. Oh, I can have conversations and you can and like you can have a difference of opinion and it'll be alright. Yeah, like, and even though I didn't, I didn't stay away from home that long. Those months that I was away from home, and it's like I did a lot of growing up. You know, traveled, you know, went on road trips, did X, Y, and Z, you know. But yeah, man, it's like I just think that that's something that a lot of people don't they don't want to recognize, or maybe they do recognize it and they're like, okay, I don't want to fucking deal with this. And you know what? That's fine. You know, I don't expect you to be somebody that you're not. I don't expect you to be the ends all be all, because I don't, bro. And it's like I don't expect you to be somebody who has it all figured out, because nobody has this shit figured out, man. It's like we're constantly learning and evolving, and like we're getting better. Um, and I think that's where a lot of people they falter at, is because, you know, just because you know somebody when they're 15 doesn't mean you know them at 35, you know, or just because you know somebody, you know, for a long period of time doesn't mean that's the same individual, you know. And a lot of people will not understand that, okay, like that, you know, it is what it is. And I think that's the most important thing, man. Is like you have to understand that people grow, people mature, and it's like at different rates and speeds, you know. Like you don't like you don't get to the level that you're currently at without experiencing some growth and, you know, some growth and maturity. And I say that to say this, man. It's like sometimes putting yourself in certain situations, whether it's friendships, romantic interests, whatever it is, it teaches you a lot. And I remember I was telling somebody I know that is like, I was like, yo, sometimes rejection isn't rejection. And they're like, what you mean? I was like, sometimes rejection is redirection. Sometimes you know, that's that, you know, that rejection that you think is rejection is actually teaching you what you don't want to deal with. And I'm a big component of people being in relationships and discovering what works and what doesn't work, you know. I'm not a big component of people who say, well, I don't believe in relationships. I'm like, damn, dog, who the fuck hurt you? Because it's like, that's honestly my first reaction. It's like, yo, who hurt you? You know what I mean? Straight up. But I'm a firm believer that rejection isn't always rejection. It's somehow in some way a redirection. Because if it was meant to work out, no matter how chaotic it would be, you know, the other person would still be trying, you know. The other person wouldn't block you on social media. They wouldn't do X, Y, and Z. And I remember telling that person, I'm like, yo, if your boyfriend blocked you on social media, take heed to that. Because men don't block people on social media, or a lot of men don't block, you know, women that they were dating on social media, unless you were so fucking just chaotic and toxic. And I mean that in a literal definition, right? It's like, if you are such a hindrance to this individual, you know how much energy it takes for us to block somebody and be like, okay, I don't want to see them at all. Yeah. It's like, it takes a lot. It's not something that we just fucking do, you know, just off emotion. It's like, yo, it's like, no. It's like, no, it's like, and I told this individual, like, look, you may not like it, but you gotta respect it, you know, because this individual, he is so tired of you that he doesn't want anything to do with you at all, you know. And I told him, it's like, it probably got to the point where he wished he could not see you in public too, you know. And she's like, what? I was like, think about it. Blocking somebody, it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean what you think it means. You know, it's gotten to the point where this individual wants nothing to do with you because of X, Y, and Z. You know, whether that shit is valid or not, it doesn't matter. You know, whether that shit is valid, who cares? Whether you think it's valid, nobody cares. Because the only thing that's valid is that person's feelings and emotions toward that situation. And me speaking as a man, blocking isn't something that we take lightly. You know, for me personally, once you're blocked, whether it's on my phone, social media, whatever it is, you don't get off that block list. Like, I'm not gonna go fucking block you, unblock you, block you, unblock you. I'm like, no, I'm not doing all that. It's like, once I tell you take care of yourself, that's code for I wish you well, man. There's a door. And a lot of women think that, men are playing with them. Like, no, men are not playing with you, bro. You know, like, we're not sassy for having boundaries. We're not sassy for our behavior. It's like, what it is that we're not putting up with none of this shit. Like, I've dealt with girls who want to be like, oh, well, I need money for my hair and and my nails. And I'm like, how's that my responsibility? And they're like, what? I was like, yeah. It's like, I'm just talking to you. I'm not even sleeping with you. I can understand if it's Christmas or your birthday, whatever. Okay, I can understand that. You know what I mean? But if you want me to pay weekly for your hair and nails, bitch, you are tripping. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, and then some women will say, well, I can get it from somebody else. I'm like, then why are you talking to me? They hate that card. Which is true. It's like, okay, you're talking to me for what then? If you can get it from somebody else, then why are you here? Like, why are you here wasting my time when you can be out there wasting somebody else's time? And a lot of people, they don't get that, bro. I've had women call me sassy. I'm like, no, I ain't fucking sassy. Like, you just ain't gonna fucking talk to me any which way, whatever it is. It's like, you got me fucked up. And a lot of these times, these women do have me fucked up. I'm like, yo, like, I'll be point blank telling them, who you think you're talking to? Like, I ain't him. Watch your fucking mouth. And they get taken back by it. I'm like, no, like, we're not doing all that shit. We're not going back and forth, and X, Y, and Z. It's not gonna happen. Boundaries are important. Setting firm boundaries are important. And I wished a lot more people would stand on them boundaries. And I wish a lot more people would be more logical, instead of emotionally charged, And I'm not talking about women. I'm just saying in general, because a lot of people will lead with their emotions, and it's like, then once you calm down, you're like, okay, like, but what does that do with the situation? It's like, we still gotta talk about what the fuck caused this, And a lot of the times people don't want to have that conversation because it involves them taking accountability. Again, I'm not just talking about women. I'm talking about the, men and women at the same time, because a lot of people will duck accountability while still trying to hold you accountable. And you can't. You can't duck accountability and hold another person accountable for the shit that they did. It's hypocritical, And as I've gotten older, I've realized, like, man, there's a lot of people out there that just they haven't grasped that concept. It's like, accountability goes both ways. You're responsible for what you say and do to another person, and you're responsible for how you feel toward that situation. And it's nobody else's job to be responsible for your emotions and your feelings and your thoughts, except you. And if you can't get that under control, I hate to tell you this, bro, but it ain't gonna work out. Anyway, y'all, this is about 29 minutes of your life that you won't get back. Hope y'all keeping the full peace, private player, positive pushing. And like I always say, know your worth because you're better than what you are. I see y'all next week Sunday. And who y'all got for the Super Bowl? I got the Seahawks. And let's just say that I want them to run the ball on the 1 yard line in the fourth quarter to win the game. All right, y'all. Much love. Peace.